everyone, Calvin here, and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial for Procreate. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to illustrate a really simple mouse character, and I'm going to go through the whole process in my kind of usual way, so this is definitely suitable for beginners. But I'm also going to make it a point to highlight some of the kind of tricks and stuff I figured out along the way, and I think this will be more useful for some of you more advanced painters as well. So I've already got a watercolor paper texture loaded into Procreate. And this time I'm using the Storybook texture. And for the brushes, I'm just going to be using the brushes in the regular watercolor kit. And as usual, I'll put links to all of this below, including the sketch I'm using here and this exact color palette. So I've got the sketch placed in here just as the very top layer, and I've set the transparency mode to multiply, and that's just so it doesn't cover up what I'm going to be painting underneath it. And to start painting, I'll just select a blank layer underneath the paper texture, just like you normally would. When I look at this illustration, I can kind of divide it up into four different parts. I've got the mouse, I've got the scarf, the jacket, and then also the details, the various details like the face and the buttons. And I think in this case, I'll start by painting the mouse. So I'm going to grab this kind of brown color at the bottom, and for the brush, I'm going to use the abstract round brush, which is part of the regular watercolor kit. And at maybe around 30 or 40%, I'll just roughly fill this out. And that looks pretty good. I'm not worried about going beyond the sketch because I can use the eraser to kind of cut it back later on. For now, I'm going to move on and add a couple of shadows and highlights. So I'm going to grab the selection tool and set it to freehand. And I'm going to add shadows around the ears and also around the bottom of the face. So all those selections are still active. So when I go to my adjustments here for the hue, saturation, and brightness, I can just darken it a little bit. And I'll do the same thing at the tops of the feet, kind of where the jacket would cast a shadow. Next, I'm going to grab the water blender brush at the bottom of the list there. And maybe around 20%, I'm just going to blend the tops of the shadows on the ears because I want there to be a kind of a strong line there just to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Now on the bottom of the face, I will blend that one out pretty much until it's gone. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of texture to this, kind of a furry texture. So I'll make a new layer above the one I've been working on. And for the color, I'll select the lightest one on the palette. I'll use the fine liner pen brush, maybe around 10%, and I'm just going to go over this and add a bunch of tiny lines like this. And because I did all these on a separate layer, I can actually just lower the transparency of those just by themselves. And I'll just set them to a point where they're barely visible but not too distracting. I think that looks pretty good. Then I'll just merge it together with the original layer. Now I want the face to be pretty smooth, and that kind of furry texture is kind of going all over it. So I'm going to grab the water blender again and just kind of do one last pass and smooth this out. Now I also like to add a little bit of highlight on the face. So I'll do that here with the selection tool set to freehand. I'll make a selection like this. I'll feather it out quite a bit. Then I'll go to my hue, saturation, and brightness and just brighten it up a little bit. And like I've said before, I've gone way beyond the sketch in a couple areas. So I'm going to grab the eraser brush and it's set to the fine liner pen. And I'm just going to cut it back wherever I've gone way beyond the edge. But I'm going to try not to get too lost in making it perfect or anything. After that, I can move on and work on the jacket. I'll do that on its own layer, so I'll make a new layer above the one I've been working on. For the color, I'll use this orange one, and for the brush, I'll use the abstract round, kind of at a medium size, and I'll just kind of roughly fill out the silhouette here. And just like before, I'm not worried about going beyond the edges because I can just cut it back later. I do have a lot of overlapping strokes, so I'm going to use the water blender and just kind of smooth those out a little bit, but I'm going to try to leave a couple of them behind because I like the kind of a rustic texture they give. Next, I want to add an overall shadow, so as it's going down, it's going to be getting darker. So I'm going to grab the selection tool, set it to freehand. I'll select the bottom half. I'll feather it out quite a bit, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken that. Next, I want to differentiate the arms and the pockets, and I'll do that by just making them lighter. So I'll grab the selection tool again, still set to freehand, and I'll just roughly follow the sketch and kind of circle that. And both of those selections are active. Now I can just go to the hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just brighten them a little bit. There we go, and that really helps them kind of stand out. Next, I'm going to add another shadow on the bottoms of the arms and pockets, just to make them pop out a little bit more. And I'll do that with the selection tool again, still set to freehand, and I'll just make a selection like this. I'll circle back and reconnect it. Then I'll go to my hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken that. Next, I'm going to turn off the sketch, just kind of temporarily. Then I'm going to grab the water blender, kind of at maybe around 10%, and I'm just going to use it to kind of blend up some of these overlapping edges and shadows. Now I just turned off the sketch so I can see it a little bit more clearly when I'm using the water blender. Now I need to turn the sketch back on, and I'm going to grab the eraser brush. Same process as before. I'm just going to go along the edge and make it match the sketch a little bit better. So with that, the jacket is all done, and I'll move on and do the scarf next. And I'm going to make that on its own layer, so I'll make a new layer above everything. For the color, I'll select the lightest color in the color palette, and I'll just quickly fill it in using the abstract round. And after that first pass, I'm going to go over it again, just to add a little bit of texture. And if you want to add some shadows down here, you can use the selection tool set to freehand, and I'll just make a selection that covers all those areas at once. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and I can just darken it, and that just makes it kind of pop out a little bit more. And following the same process I did before, I'm going to use the eraser again and just kind of cut it back so it matches the sketch. Now there's a trick here that I've kind of figured out. It looks good if you use it very sparingly, but it's this kind of intentional mistake white line. You can see it better if I turn off the sketch. Just by leaving a little bit of a gap there, it makes it look much more realistic and much more natural, but it's important that you don't get too carried away and add it everywhere, because then it starts to look like an outline, and I'm not a big fan of outlines. Now with all the major parts finished and filled in, I can move on and start adding a couple of details. And I'm going to start by adding just a few outlines, very sparingly. And it helps if I turn off the sketch. So I'll turn that off just for now. I'm going to do these outlines on a different layer. And basically there's just like a contrast issue with the arms. So I'm going to use a kind of medium orange color like that. I'll use the fine liner pen. And at a pretty small size, maybe like 8%. I'll just add a couple of very faint outlines just wherever I think the contrast needs a little bit of help. And there we go, that's probably enough. I'm also going to take a chance here to add the line down the center of the jacket, and I'm going to make sure to make it intentionally kind of messed up because I don't want it to be too perfect. And the reason I did this on its own layer is because I want to set this to multiply. I'll lower the opacity to 0, then I'll slowly raise it back up just until those details are just visible enough that you kind of notice them, but they don't stand out too much. I also think on this same layer, I might add a couple of lines on the scarf. So same thing, fine liner pen, and I'll just add a couple of lines like this. Next, I'm going to move on and work on the face, and I want that to be on its own layer, so I'll make a new layer, and I'm also going to turn the sketch back on so I can see where everything goes. And I'm just going to use the fine liner pen and really quickly fill this out using the color number 1 from the color palette for all the white details like the glasses, and then I'll just use pure black for the eyes, nose, and mouth. One thing that often happens when you make illustrations like this is they end up looking kind of babyish. And I think it's because it's just so easy to just make these happy little illustrations. So I'm going to intentionally make the face or the expression here a little bit sour. And I do this because it sort of counterbalances the cuteness of it with a little bit of seriousness. And that makes the whole illustration look a little bit more sophisticated. And this kind of sour expression is also reflected in the very tiny kind of beady eyes. So an easy way to do that, to kind of accentuate the eyes, is first I fill them in with black, then I'm going to select a kind of medium dark gray color, and I'll add a highlight on the bottom, and it's barely visible. Then I'm going to select pure white, and I'll do a little kind of sparkle right there in the corner. And this kind of shininess and the small size also makes the expression a little bit uncertain. And next here, just as a final touch, I'm going to add the buttons on the jacket, and I'm going to do these on the same layer I did the face details on. I'm just going to turn off the sketch first, and then using the fine liner pen and a kind of a light color like this, I'll just rough those in. And there we go, this one is all done. And I'm definitely tempted to add more patterns and add more details, but I found that with this style, it's a good idea to kind of leave it simple. And here's what this one looks like when I print it out. So hopefully the process in this video is pretty easy to follow, especially if you use the same mouse sketch that I used here. And you guys can download that one for free. I put a link in the description, but also I want to encourage you to give it a try to create your own character from scratch. At least for me, I've always found animal characters way more fun to create because I don't have to worry about proportions and stuff, and I think you'll find it a lot easier than you expect. And that pretty much wraps it up. As always, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.